Okay, so picture this. It's the 1630s in the brand new Massachusetts Bay Colony. One woman, a midwife, a mother of 15, and a brilliant religious thinker, posed such a threat that the leaders of the colony thought she could literally tear down their entire city upon a hill. That woman's name was Anne Hutchinson, and her story is one of the very first and most significant challenges to authority in American history. So let's dive in to how she became such a threat.
Just listen to this. This was her defiant defense when she was on trial for heresy. It's such a powerful line, and it cuts right to the heart of the whole conflict. See, she wasn't just having a friendly debate about Scripture. She was claiming a direct, personal, spiritual authority, basically saying she had a direct line to God, which you can imagine threatened to blow up the entire power structure of the colony.
And that really is the central question here, isn't it? How did a deeply religious woman who was just hosting meetings in her living room to chat about the Sunday sermon become public enemy number one in a society that was built on religious devotion? The answer tells us everything about the rigid, almost brittle foundations of the Puritan world and just how revolutionary her ideas really were.
All right, so first up, let's get to know this dangerous woman. See, the thing is, she wasn't some outsider trying to stir the pot. She was a committed Puritan herself who crossed the ocean for the freedom to practice her faith.
I mean, religion was in her DNA. Her own father was a minister, and she so admired her minister, John Cotton, that she followed him all the way across the Atlantic. So when she started hosting these meetings in her Boston home, at first they were just for women to go over the week's sermons, but they exploded in popularity. Pretty soon, even powerful men were showing up, all because Anne was just brilliant, and she had a perspective that was, let's just say, very controversial.
Okay, to really get why she was seen as so dangerous, we have to pull back and look at the world she was walking into. This was a society where church and state weren't just connected, they were the same thing. The entire social order was seen as being designed by God himself. At the heart of all this was this huge theological showdown. Think of it like this. The official church doctrine was what they called a covenant of works. Basically, you prove you're saved by following the rules and doing good deeds. This gave the ministers all the power, right? They were the referees. But Anne, she was all about the covenant of grace. She argued that salvation wasn't something you could earn. It was a free gift, an internal experience. And that undermined the minister's authority and, it was an early whisper of a core American idea, that what you believe inside matters more than what any institution tells you.
And if the theology wasn't enough, there was the simple fact that she was a woman. Under a legal doctrine called coverture, a married woman basically didn't exist in the eyes of the law. Seriously, she couldn't own property, sign a contract, or speak in public. Her husband covered her entire legal identity. So for a woman to not just speak, but to lead a religious debate with powerful men, that wasn't just improper, it was like taking a sledgehammer to the very structure of their society.
And this quote, wow, it really shows you the kind of deep-seated misogyny they were dealing with. Women weren't just seen as secondary. They were thought to be naturally weaker, more emotional, and way more likely to be tempted by evil. So for a woman like Anne, who was clearly smarter and knew the Bible better than the men grilling her, she wasn't just an exception. To them, she was an abomination, a glitch in God's plan.
So you can see all the pieces are there for a massive collision. Let's look at how her private meetings spiraled into a full-blown public crisis, because her ideas definitely did not stay behind closed doors.
This right here was the absolute core of her teaching, and the most dangerous part. She went beyond just talking about grace. She argued that the people who had received God's grace, the elect, could actually talk directly to God. You could just talk to God. You didn't need to go through a minister. You could cut out the middleman. Now you can imagine how amazing that sounded to the average person, but for the clergy, this was basically a declaration of war.
So let's just break down what her ideas really meant, because the implications were revolutionary. Think about it. If your own conscience is the top authority, well, what do you need the ministers for? And if God can talk to anyone, why not a woman? And if a woman can hear from God, why can't she be a leader? See, every single one of these ideas was a direct hit on the foundations of Puritan society.
Things got so tense that they actually gave it a name, the Antinomian Crisis. It literally means against the law, and the leaders were terrified her teachings would just lead to total anarchy. So they did what powerful people do when they're scared. They put her on trial. In 1637, Anne Hutchinson was hauled before the general court.
And this is what the governor, John Winthrop, had to say about it. For him, this wasn't a church debate. This was sedition. He basically said her claims of talking to God were baseless and couldn't be checked by anyone or anything, not reason, not even the Bible. And if anyone can just say, God told me to do this, how can you govern? The whole system would collapse.
But here's the thing. Anne was more than a match for them. For most of the trial, she knew her scriptures so well, she was basically running intellectual circles around these powerful men. And she answered them with this incredible, unwavering statement of faith. She's basically telling the most powerful court in the land, you can't touch me. Your power means nothing compared to God's. But then she made a crucial mistake. After hours and hours of questioning, probably exhausted, she finally played her final card. She declared that her teachings didn't just come from the Bible, but from an immediate revelation directly from God, who, she said, promised to destroy her persecutors. And that was the sound of the trap snapping shut. Claiming to be a modern-day prophet, that was the one thing they couldn't forgive. It was blasphemy. And just like that, the trial was over.
And if you want to know just how seriously they took this heresy, listen to this next part. It's pretty chilling. You see, Puritans had this belief that your spiritual state could physically manifest itself, that sin could literally corrupt your body. After she was banished, a rumor spread that Anne had suffered a miscarriage. Winthrop and the others seized on this, describing it as a monstrous birth. In their minds, her misshapen opinions had produced a deformed monster. For them, this was God himself, providing physical proof that she was a heretic. After that, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. It was swift, and it was absolute. Anne Hutchinson was a threat that had to be physically removed. So first, she's banished from the colony. Then she's formally excommunicated from the church, basically kicked out of their entire world. She and her followers flee to Rhode Island, which was known for being much more tolerant. After her husband died, she moved even further away, into Dutch territory, what's now the Bronx in New York. But tragically, her timing couldn't have been worse. She settled right in the middle of a violent conflict between the Dutch settlers and the Lenape people, and she and most of her family were killed in an attack. And her old enemies back in Boston saw this as God's final, bloody judgment on her. But that's not where her story ends. Not even close. In the centuries that followed, Anne Hutchinson transformed into a powerful, enduring American symbol. What was once seen as heresy is now seen through a totally different lens. Today, she's looked at as a pioneer of religious liberty, a champion for the power of the individual conscience. She's remembered as one of early America's most important female voices and a key figure in the argument for separating church and state. It's this core idea that your own conscience, your own beliefs, are a sacred space that no government, no church has the right to invade.
And this legacy isn't just an abstract idea. You can literally find it on a map. The area where she made her final home was named after her, and millions of people drive on the Hutchinson River Parkway in New York every year, and most of them probably have no idea they're on a road named for one of the most remarkable and rebellious women in American history.
And all of this leaves us with a really big, timeless question that's just as relevant today as it was 400 years ago. When does one person's conscience become a threat to the social order? Her story is still one of the most powerful test cases for that fundamental tension that every free society has to wrestle with.